Imagine getting kicked out of your adventuring party the exact second you finish celebrating your brand new S-rank promotion. Our guy Eustus is just trying to enjoy his beer with his squad, listening to them hype up their top-tier status when the party's swordswoman abruptly tells him to pack his bags and hit the road. He's completely blindsided, but honestly, he just sighs. He's lost count of how many times he's been tossed to the curb for the exact same reason. See, his only skill is appraisal, which is great for figuring out what a random rock or potion does, but completely useless if you actually need to punch a monster in the face. It's a cosmic joke that this is his one and only ability. He tried forcing himself to learn swords, spears, bows, and magic, but he never even cracked past the beginner level. Getting dropped for being dead weight still feels like a massive punch to the gut though. Standing outside his room, he resolved to just suck it up and find a new squad tomorrow, but the frustration still gets to him, and he shoves his door open a little too hard. Inside, a chest he dropped off earlier has popped open, dumping its contents everywhere. It's a parting gift from the armored dude in his old party, but it's literally just junk he already appraised, or so he thought. Looking closer, a few pieces look totally unfamiliar. He curses his own muscle memory for wanting to appraise garbage even at rock bottom, but decides one quick look couldn't hurt and activates his skill. He gets a read on a sword hilt, a spearhead, a banner scrap, and a bow frame, but all their details come back as completely unknown. He figures they're just ancient, fragile junk. Picking up the sword hilt, he's totally stumped, but then something catches his eye. A weird spherical crystal is just rolling on the floor next to the chest. He picks it up, and his system flags it as the crystal of truth, but flat out refuses to let him appraise it. He just stands there, wondering why it threw an impossible error instead of just saying unknown like the other junk. Staring at the glowing rock, all he can hear is the echoes of his ex-party calling him a useless piece of dead weight. He grips the crystal tight, the irony hitting him hard. He can't even use his one pathetic skill on this thing. So, in a massive fit of rage, he draws his sword and violently smashes the rock into pieces. The crystal shatters instantly, leaving him feeling like an idiot for taking his anger out on a shiny rock. But then the room just ceases to exist, replaced by a swirling dark void. He's completely swallowed by the darkness, panicking, realizing the broken crystal just yeeted him into the shadow realm. His entire life starts flashing before his eyes. Baby pictures, training arcs, watching real adventurers. Floating in the void, he remembers why he even put up with all this crap. It was purely because he saw a knight absolutely wrecking a boss monster when he was a kid, and he thought those heroes looked incredible. That was the moment he found his ultimate goal. He just wanted to be an adventurer. Faced with his own pathetic limits, he asks himself if he's really okay with his story ending as a glorified loot appraiser. His fist clenches, and he screams at the void that there is no effing way he's accepting this. Suddenly, the darkness snaps into a bright, endless field of white flowers. Our guy chuckles, wondering if he just got sent straight to the afterlife, but a voice answers him. A guy in a flowing white robe strolls through the flowers, rocking a slight smile and an eye patch. The MC has zero clue who this guy is, but the stranger insists on proper introductions. MC tentatively asks if that crystal belonged to him. The guy says yup, and MC instantly starts sweating because he definitely just broke it. The stranger casually drops that it was a priceless vintage artifact from thousands of years ago, sending our guy into a panic of apologies. But the guy just laughs, revealing that shattering the crystal was actually the activation trigger. MC yells in embarrassment, wondering if he could have just tapped it instead of going full caveman on it. The stranger brushes it off, cheerfully noting that it brought him here, so it worked. He explains they are currently hanging out inside MC's own consciousness. It's a spiritual dream domain, explicitly designed as a waiting room for whoever was destined to unlock the artifact's true power. The guy reveals he chose MC specifically because he refused to accept his own garbage stats and wanted to change his fate. He drops a bombshell. MC now has the potential to become the strongest being alive. A system prompt teases that a unique skill is about to force his potential to bloom. The man introduces himself as Rowan, explaining his own unique skill can basically hack and reshape other people's abilities. But to do it, the user has to completely understand their own desires first. Rowan leans in, taps MC on the forehead, and asks what he actually saw in that dark void. He points out that those weren't just flashbacks. MC grabs his head as it clicks. He saw memories of things he never actually did, featuring people he never met. Rowan smiles and explains those were visions of his potential futures. They were fragments of what he could have been if he'd made different choices. He saw the absolute peak of what he was capable of, and now Rowan is going to draw out that exact power so MC can overwrite his current pathetic self. Rowan holds out his hand, telling him to grab it before the magical recoil hits. MC hesitates for a second, fully aware this guy gives off massive shady magician vibes, but his desire to actually become strong wins out. He grabs Rowan's hand, internally praying this isn't a scam. Instantly, a massive surge of pure energy explodes in his chest. Rowan tells him that finding the crystal might have been a fluke, but he should treat it like hitting the lottery. Or, as he warmly puts it, just call it fate. As glowing petals swirl around them, MC realizes this is 100% real. Rowan fades away into the light, wishing him the best, right as a massive system notification drops. Appraisal has evolved into inheritance. MC violently gasps awake. He's back on his messy bedroom floor, right next to the open chest, wondering if he just passed out. But the broken crystal shards are completely gone. He checks his status and reads the description for inheritance. Touching weapons or armor lets him absorb the previous owner's power, memories, and skills. He's shell-shocked. This is basically a cheat code to download the combat experience of actual legends. He reaches for a tattered piece of cloth on the floor, deciding to test drive his new OP skill on the random junk. Sitting on his bed, he holds the glowing item and triggers inheritance. Instantly, his brain gets flooded with the entire life story of a legendary female knight named Sword St. Julius. He lives through her battles, her struggles, her entire existence in a matter of seconds. The sheer weight of her life is so intense, it literally brings him to tears. But as the emotional wave passes, he realizes he just downloaded her entire combat prowess directly into his muscle memory. His system goes crazy, pinging him with new unlocked abilities like Sword Saint's Blessing. He finally stands up, realizing he desperately needs to hit the bathroom and get some food. Looking out the window, he sees it's already evening. He completely panics when he realizes he was knocked out for an entire day processing just one life. Eating dinner by candlelight, he reflects on how insanely draining that power-up was. But inheriting her power also unlocked a massive piece of lore. The other broken junk in that chest belonged to the legendary heroes who traveled with her. There was Sage Solomon, the magic prodigy, Meteor Cran, the heavy-hitting tank, and Julius herself. Plus, Rowan the Phantom Demon, Freya the Saintess, and Artemisia, who basically had a Byakugan. Ghostly images of the 6 legends float around him, and he finally understands that they're all passing the torch to him. It's going to take a ton of mental fortitude, and several days to absorb all their intense lifespans. But he kneels on the floor in front of their ancient relics, totally locked in. He screams inheritance and dives right back into the Matrix to download the rest. Cut to 1 week later. Our MC is driving a horse cart down a dirt road, having successfully absorbed all 6 lifetimes. He cleaned out his room and is finally hitting the road solo. He's heading to the adventurer hub of Regalia, absolutely buzzing with an unreal amount of new skills he hasn't even tested yet. But the sky starts hitting aggressively dark. A massive rainstorm hits, forcing him to push the cart harder past some old ruins. He keeps his guard up, knowing this kind of weather is basically an open invitation for monster ganks. Suddenly, he hears a commotion up ahead. Deep in the rainy forest, 3 female travelers are backed into a corner by a goblin ambush. You've got an elf archer, a cleric, and a catgirl fighter fighting for their lives. MC peeks from behind a tree, doing the math. There's at least 30 goblins swarming them. He knows running back for town guards would take way too long. The old him would have been completely useless here. But things are a little different now. He sets his jaw, deciding he's not letting them die today. The spirits of his 6 inner legends hype him up, ready to lend him their ridiculous stats. Standing right beside the ethereal ghost of the archer hero, he summons a magic bow. He mentally asks the squad to lend him a hand, and then he just drops right into the middle of the goblin horde, instantly slashing a few to pieces and casually announcing his arrival. He glances back at the girls to make sure they're in one piece. He tells the trio to fall back and grab some popcorn while he handles the trash. Activating his new clairvoyance skill, Artemisia's spirit flashes beside him like a targeting HUD. He instantly locks onto 10 melee goblins and 2 snipers hiding in the trees. Reaching his hand out, he decides to treat this like a simple tutorial level. He pops Sword's Blessing, summoning massive swords made of pure light as Julius's ghost flexes behind him. He grabs one of the light swords, leaving the catgirl absolutely speechless. Then he vanishes into a blur of speed, carving through the goblin front line like butter. The adventurers just watch in stunned silence. The guy is moving so fast they can't even track him, but the cleric screams a warning as the 2 hidden goblin mages pop out. They start charging up a double magic blast. MC barely even looks at them, scoffing that their cast time is way too slow. He triggers Dispel Chain, shooting anti-magic chains into the sky that instantly cancel out the goblin spells. With their magic denied, MC raises a single arm to finish the job. He casts Vortex, dropping a massive magical nuke from the sky that fries the entire area with lightning. The remaining goblins are left smoking on the ground as MC sighs, disappointed that they barely counted as a warm-up. He shakes the residual electricity off his hand, figuring that's a wrap. Turning back to the girls, he asks if they're okay. The catgirl and the cleric are practically vibrating with awe, staring at him like he's Superman. They rush him, completely fangirling over his insane power display while he just stands there awkwardly. The tall elf woman smiles and reins her friends in before they overwhelm him. She reminds them they skipped a pretty important step, which confuses our guy for a second. But then all 3 girls bow deeply, giving him a massive, heartfelt thank you for saving their lives. Out in the sunlit clearing, MC just brushes it off, genuinely glad he finally got to be the hero he always wanted to be. Back in the spirit realm, Rowan and the legendary heroes watch their new protege go to work. Rowan is pretty hyped to see Eustus actually handling the power well. He rallies the squad, asking Julius and the rest of the spirits to keep backing the kid up, at least until the time is right. Meanwhile, in the living world, Eustus gives the three girls a lift toward the capital city of Regalia. Turns out they got completely jumped by goblins and a log trap, leaving them stranded with a busted cart until Eustus offered a ride. He patches up Arya's leg with some healing magic along the way, casually blowing their minds, while secretly surprising himself that the skill worked so well. Realizing they haven't formally met, Arya decides to fix that. She introduces herself as the party leader. Tia points out her obvious elf ears, and Mana chimes in to praise his magic. He just tells them to call him Eus. To pass the time on the road, Arya starts asking the classic icebreaker questions. When Tia asks where he is from, Eustus mentions a town called Resta. Tia wonders why he is traveling so far from home. This forces Eustus to dodge the question so he doesn't have to explain his humiliating firing. Deflecting, he asks about their hometown instead. They mention a quiet village called Mayade, which Eustus actually remembers visiting on an old quest. They explain they have been a party since childhood, but had to head to Regalia to find decent work. Soon enough, they clear the tree line and spot the massive walls of Regalia. Eustus flashes his ID at the gate, getting them all inside without a hitch. The girls are totally starstruck by the sheer size of the city. Eustus drops them off in the middle of town, letting them know this is their stop. Arya thanks him for literally saving their lives, and he plays it cool. He wishes them luck, certain they will cross paths again in the adventurer circuit, and then wades goodbye. Once he is finally alone, the fatigue hits him like a truck. Channeling ancient hero spirits takes a massive toll on his body, so he decides to just grab an inn for the night and handle the guild stuff tomorrow. The next morning, Eustus rolls up to the Adventurer Guild, totally dwarfed by the massive building. Inside, it is packed with veterans and huge quest boards. He hits the front desk, where a super capable receptionist greets him. When Eustus says he is flying solo, she drops some bad news. Regalia runs on a strict party system for most quests. Eustus realizes his whole solo plan is dead on arrival, but right on cue, a familiar voice yells out. It is the girls, and Arya immediately suggests they team up. Eustus is totally surprised to see them again so soon. Mana admits they totally eavesdropped on his party problem. The receptionist happily suggests they form a temporary trial party, and the girls are instantly on board. Arya is absolutely hyped, promising to prove they aren't just dead weight. Fast forward less than 24 hours, and they are right back in the Garag Great Forest. Arya grabbed an F-rank quest to collect 20 herbs, and Mana is confident it will be a total breeze. Arya charges into the brush, ready to conquer the forest. Cut to them, finding absolutely nothing. The girls are completely gassed, complaining that finding heel grass in a giant forest is basically impossible. Eustus steps in and drops some heavy botany knowledge, explaining that the grass needs specific humidity and sunlight to grow. The girls just stare at him blankly. Before the gears finally start turning, suddenly, they spot the exact conditions near a stream. They gather around a sunny patch of plants right by the water. Eustus shows them how to harvest the roots without snapping them so they sell for a higher price. He downplays his expertise while helping Tia pull them up, but internally, he remembers how he got that knowledge, spending long, sleepless nights studying this stuff just to be useful to his old toxic party. Arya admits they really wanted to carry him today, but totally failed. Still, they bag up the loot and head back, praising him for carrying the team yet again. Back in the city streets, a little kid is crying his eyes out. A massive bird monster called a Stelcrow just swooped in and stole his bag. Arya stands beside the kid, looking super concerned. Eustus steps up, promising to get it back while glowing with magic. He recognizes the monster as a total menace. He summons an ethereal bow, making Tia wonder if he can even hit a tiny, fast target in the sky. But Eustus just calls on the spirit of Artemisia and activates her clairvoyance skill. He draws back the magical string and fires a perfect shot that threads the needle, snapping the bag strap without hitting the bird. The strap breaks, sending the loot falling right back down, leaving the girls and the kid absolutely stunned by the god-tier snipe. Eustus hands the bag back to the kid, who practically worships him. Back at the guild, the receptionist happily hands over their coin reward. Arya and Tia whisper to each other, nervous that Eustus is going to ditch them because he is way out of their league. Arya nervously asks if he will make the trial permanent, promising they will keep grinding either way. Eustus just smiles and says he would be honored to join them. The girls are absolutely shocked, and then immediately ecstatic, bowing super deeply to welcome him. Eustus bows right back, asking them to take care of him. The whole lobby stares at the four of them aggressively bowing to each other, earning them the nickname the Bowing Party. Eustus is still keeping up his daily grind, counting out his push-ups, while thinking about just how broken and hard to control his inherited hero skills really are. But a workout is a workout. At the guild, the crew reports the goblin ambush to the receptionist. Tia is still hyping up Eustus's skills, making him sweat a bit, but the receptionist is mostly just concerned. Goblins don't usually spawn in that forest. When they mention the goblins moved in a swarm, she promises to kick this up the chain of command. Eustus knows that while low-level mobs are a joke solo, they're a nightmare in packs. A new infestation could ruin the whole Ryzen forest. The receptionist waves them off, wishing them luck on today's actual quest. Out in the Garrod Great Forest, Tia draws back a glowing magic bow, and casually snipes a branch to drop a rotafruit. Eustus is impressed she can use magic archery, but Tia admits it's too hard to control for fast-moving targets, which is why she keeps a normal bow handy. She practically gets stars in her eyes asking exactly how much training it took for Eustus to get so overpowered. Our guy instantly feels guilty since his strength is basically a downloaded save file from dead heroes. So he deflects, giving a vague, just train until you're satisfied answer, which she totally buys. Before they can unpack that, 3 giant mantises crash the party. These are the actual bounties for today's quest. Eustus plays it efficient. He claims 2 for himself and leaves the last one for the girls. He immediately rushes in. He tells Mana to look for an opening to drop a fire spell, before leaping right at his targets. Splitting the aggro, he positions himself perfectly between the bugs, jumps up, and decides to disarm them first. He brings his glowing sword down for a heavy strike, aiming right for the exposed weak point. One hit completely flattens the monster, crossing one off the list instantly. Meanwhile, Arya is dodging scythe swings from her bug, yelling for some crowd control. Mana steps up, casting Ice Wall to completely freeze the mantis in its tracks, giving Arya the perfect opening to chop it down. With the fight wrapped up, Eustus asks Mana why she held back on her fire magic. She nervously admits she was terrified of missing and burning the entire forest down. Eustus doesn't mind. Environmental awareness is actually a huge plus in a fight, but he tells her to watch closely as he points off into the trees. Turns out there are more mantises playing hide-and-seek in the brush. Eustus calmly readies a flare burst, right in front of a wide-eyed Mana, and casually lobs the spinning rings of fire through the woods. It detonates right on target, blowing the hidden monster to pieces. Channeling the spirit of the sage Solomon, Eustus drops some heavy lore, explaining that magic is just the power to bring imagination to life. He tells her that spells are just methods you repeat until they stick, but your raw mental image is what actually steers the magic. If she puts in a steady effort, she can make whatever she dreams up real. And yeah, that kind of supportive mentoring definitely gets a blush out of Mana. Later back in town, Arya celebrates a smooth mission report. She asks if Eustus is coming with them, but he waves them off, saying he's got some homework to do. The girls head out, leaving Eustus to hit the Regalia Central Library to dig up info on the heroes he inherited. Except, there's absolutely nothing. Not a single record exists. Walking home that night, he realizes that even after thousands of years, total historical erasure doesn't just happen by accident. He suspects the Cursed King's dying curse didn't just kill the heroes, it literally deleted their existence from the world's memory. His lore crafting gets interrupted when he spots Mana walking ahead of him. She turns and flags him down on the street. She admits she originally got into magic because she loved the fairy tales about it making dreams come true. But the actual grind of learning spells was so tough, she almost quit. But after watching him pull off that insane stunt in the forest, she gets it now. She's realizing magic really is something that gets her heart racing. Reaching up toward the night sky, she promises to train even harder, wanting to turn her own imagination into reality just like he said. Eustus smiles, completely backing her up. In his own heart, he made a vow that he will train harder as well, but as night falls again, things out in the woods are getting way worse. Deep in the forest, an absolute horde of goblins is gathering around a masked leader who ominously mutters that he just needs a little more time. Eustus and his new crew are chilling at the guild after settling into their daily grind, when Tia offhandedly mentions how young he looks. So Eustus casually drops the bomb that he's actually 25. The girls absolutely lose their minds, having assumed he was 18 with that baby face of his. Feeling awkward, he quickly clears his throat and tries to pivot to tomorrow's quest. But before they can pick one, the guild receptionist bursts in with a massive emergency. The neighboring city of Resta is calling for backup against an incoming swarm of goblins. And when a guy asks for the exact numbers, she nervously confirms the worst, 50,000 of them. Eustus is completely stunned, putting two and two together from their recent forest encounter, while the receptionist explains that witnesses spotted a goblin lord leading the charge. Eustus realizes the math is looking grim, since an army that size could crush a nation, let alone a tiny town with a few hundred fighters. He and Tia quietly discuss how rare and dangerous a goblin lord's command is, before the receptionist chimes back in with a polite reminder that this suicide mission is totally voluntary. She basically tells the rookies to stick to normal requests, and Eustus agrees, telling Arya their F-rank party would just be dead weight in a full-scale war. Arya clenches her fist, clearly frustrated by their lack of strength, while the others look bummed out. Tia seems especially bothered, stepping up to Eustus, before abruptly excusing herself, leaving the rest of them startled. Eustus watches her head off to her inn, confirming they'll meet at the same time tomorrow. He looks down, wondering if he made her worry, before deciding it's actually fine, because he knows if she had asked him whether he was taking the suicide mission, he wouldn't have had an answer for her. Later, standing in front of the massive recruitment poster, he listens to the other adventurers talk about the sheer scale of the threat. He glances over at his sleeping party, knowing he could handle solo activities. He knows he can't just sit this out and let a massive bloodbath happen. Getting a determined look, he decides he has to step up and make his inherited heroes proud. Gathering the girls back at the table, he brings up the aid request. He breaks the news that he's taking the job, but apologizes, telling them they have to stay behind for their own safety. Arya looks down, not wanting to accept it, but despite their worry, the girls ultimately just tell him to make sure he comes back alive. By the next morning, Eustus is packed into a wagon convoy headed straight for the danger zone. Meanwhile, over in the valley town of Resta, the locals are scrambling to throw up spiked wooden barricades, and morale in the streets is absolutely rock bottom. Inside the local guild, Eustus's old toxic party is having a total meltdown, with the blonde warrior throwing a tantrum. The witch complains about everything, noting that people are already suggesting they retreat. She points out the lifeless faces around them, calling this fight a premature funeral against impossible odds. The blonde warrior tells her to shut up, but she snaps back that half their comrades have already fled. She yells that 50,000 monsters is just too much. But the cleric tries to be the voice of reason, pointing out that running isn't an option if they want the town to survive. Suddenly, the emergency bells start screaming. The witch and warrior look shocked, since the attack wasn't supposed to happen until tomorrow. Panic erupts in the guild as people scream about the horde arriving early. Outside, an endless sea of green is already marching across the plains. The cleric looks terrified as she realizes exactly what it means to face a goblin lord. The monsters aren't just swarming, they're marching with terrifying military discipline. A panicked guy asks the blonde swordswoman about reinforcements, but he realizes they just have to hold the line now. He starts barking orders, sending the high-ranked teams to the front line to take the heat. The witch bitterly complains about being forced to vanguard just because they barely scraped into S rank. But the swordsman ignores her, charging forward and ordering everyone to push the line. The battlefield instantly turns into an absolute meat grinder as the adventurers clash with the horde. Mages fire off massive magic circles. But the armored tank of the group complains that the monsters just keep coming. The witch screams his name as he takes a massive hit. Desperate, she throws up a giant wall of jagged ice to block the advance. The cleric immediately burns an ancient healing spell on the tank, who tries to thank them while the witch just yells at him to stay focused. The four of them catch their breath behind the towering ice wall. But Cracks instantly starts spiderwebbing across the surface. The barrier violently shatters, sending massive chunks of ice flying everywhere. As the dust clears, two hulking hobgoblins loom right over them, backed by an endless sea of regular mobs. The blonde warrior immediately suggests running for their lives, but a wide shot shows the horrifying reality. They are completely surrounded with nowhere to go. The group looks on in absolute despair at the overwhelming numbers. The witch braces for a giant club to flatten her, but right at that moment, an enormous shadowy attack drops from the sky. A massive barrage of high-speed slashes rains down, instantly nuking the hobgoblins and vaporizing the horde. As the dust settles, the old party realizes they're somehow still alive, standing in the middle of a cratered wasteland. The blonde warrior notices the destruction and spots a single figure standing in the rubble. He stares in absolute jaw-dropping shock, because the guy who just effortlessly saved their lives is none other than Eustus. Just a moment ago, the guild's strike force finally rolls up to Resta in a line of carriages, but one look out the window tells the adventurers everything they need to know. The front line is already crumbling under the horde. Eustus doesn't even wait for the carriages to stop. He just yeets himself out the door, yelling that he's going ahead because the defenders clearly need backup right now. He instantly drops an absolute rain of ethereal swords on the goblin army, perfectly thinning the herd before charging in with his glowing blade to mop up the rest. Down in the dirt, the frontline defenders realize they're not going to die today. As Eustus tears through the monsters, someone in the crowd starts to recognize him. The witch points out he looks an awful lot like the deadweight appraiser they just kicked to the curb, which her blonde boss immediately calls BS on. But even he has to admit the guy is wearing his cloak the exact same weird way. Eustus senses them staring and turns around, realizing he just saved the very people who fired him. He freezes up and tries to put on a fake tough guy voice to hide his identity, but his old boss leans right in and blows his cover anyway. Surprisingly, the blonde warrior doesn't apologize for kicking him out, figuring Eustus was just hiding his true OP stats back then. But he does swallow his pride, bows, and genuinely thanks him for the save. Looking at his old squad, our guy wonders for a split second if they'd still be a team if he had this god-tier power earlier. But nah. Getting dumped was exactly what he needed to actually level up in life, so he just walks away without looking back. As the dust settles, something starts itching at the back of his mind regarding the intel. The guild reported 50,000 goblins and a goblin lord, but there's barely a fraction of that here and no boss in sight. It hits him like a truck that the masked leader isn't an idiot. This entire siege on Resta was just a massive decoy to leave the real target completely defenseless. Regalia, the exact same city where he left his new party behind. He doesn't hesitate, completely shattering the ground beneath him to launch himself forward. He ignores the literal burning sensation tearing through his muscles and activates Divine Acceleration, a Godspeed skill he inherited from the hero Cran, exploding off the battlefield. His old party can only watch in absolute shock as he vanishes, casually noting that the guy is officially no longer human. Pushing the skill this hard instantly triggers a flood of Cran's old memories, showing a beautiful woman named Sylvia. She smiles and calls Cran the fastest lancer alive, but the memory sharply twists into a nightmare, showing her brutally impaled. Cran's devastating grief bleeds into Eustus's mind, screaming that he needs to be faster so he never has to lose anyone again. The flashback shifts to Cran finding a new reason to fight at the royal capital. He stumbles into a grand hall and locks eyes with Artemisia, actually mistaking her for his dead love for a second. Cran introduces himself, and she gently corrects him that Sylvia is gone. She smiles and properly introduces herself as Artemisia. Even Solomon's spirit pops up to note that Cran was basically drawn to her by fate, regardless of what he actually intended. The memory trip violently ends as Eustus finally stops, completely out of breath. He realizes he actually blacked out while sprinting at Mach 10 and checks his surroundings. He slides to a halt right at the edge of the Garad Great Forest. Staring ahead, he mutters a breathless denial. Because as he looks over the ridge, he realizes he's too late. The entire city of Regalia is already completely swallowed by flames. Rewind. When he left Regalia, and things are suspiciously quiet. The girls are just chilling by the fountain, noticing how empty the streets feel. It's been 2 days since Eustus left for Resta, and Arya's getting antsy. She decides sitting around isn't going to bring him back any faster. Since all the high-ranking parties are out of town, she figures they might as well grab a quest to kill time. Tia and Mana are totally on board with the distraction. But before they can even hit the guild, the alarm bells start going off. A guard comes sprinting down the street screaming that a massive goblin swarm is invading the city. He collapses right in front of them as the civilians completely lose their minds. The girls freeze, realizing just how bad the timing is. Because right on cue, a tidal wave of goblins crashes through the gates, blowing stuff up and swarming the streets. Mana points out the obvious, noting that with only the low-level adventurers left in town, fighting this horde head-on is a death sentence. But they step up anyway, with Arya directing the crowd to pull back deeper into the city so they can bottleneck the defense. They split the civilians to the rear and group whatever fighters they have left into a makeshift front line. It's absolute chaos as the goblins start clashing with the fleeing stragglers. Taking out a few on her own, Tia realizes they've been relying way too much on Eustus carrying them lately. Arya yells that with their OP carry out of town, they just have to hold their own for once. Mana drops some jagged crystal magic to block a path, buying them a few precious seconds. She shouts that they just need to survive long enough for him to get back. Arya and Tia are slightly taken aback by the normally quiet mage's sudden burst of hype. But over the last month, they've all seen what Eustus is really made of, and they know he'd never abandon them. That absolute faith is all the motivation they need. They throw themselves back into the meat grinder, totally convinced he's already on his way. And luckily for them, their personal shooting star is just arriving on the scene. A shockwave absolutely yeets the frontline goblins into the sky. Eustus drops right into the middle of the street, completely winded from sprinting across the country. But he still manages to look over his shoulder with a smile and ask if they're holding up okay. The girls are practically in tears seeing him. They tell him they knew he'd make it. He gives Arya and Tia some well-deserved head pats for holding the line. Then he turns his attention to the burning city. The place is a mess, and even though the girls insist they can keep fighting, he's not about to let them. Channeling the spirit of Saintess Freya, he tells them to sit back and leave the heavy lifting to him. He focuses his mana into a massive holy spell. Together with Freya's phantom, he raises his staff and commands the trash mobs to back off. The girls watch in absolute awe. A colossal, glowing barrier erupts over the entire walled city, completely cutting off the invasion. With the town secured, Arya warns him that the Goblin Lord is probably waiting out there to make a move. Eustus just casually walks toward the gates, knowing full well he has to end this at the source. He flashes them one last smile and tells them to wait for him. Out in the woods, the mastermind behind the horde watches the city light up. The masked goblin leader is just chilling on a literal throne of bones, whining about how useless his weak minions are. He figures he's sitting pretty comfortably out in the forest, until a barrage of glowing magical swords suddenly rains down from the sky, bombarding his little skull setup. Eustus touches down right in the middle of the crater, ready to collect the boss drop. But the goblin just grins from under his mask. Unbothered, Eustus locks in. He kicks off the dirt and closes the gap in an instant. He swings his glowing blade right for the leader's neck, but the boss easily swats the attack aside and delivers a brutal strike right into Eustus's gut. The monster literally laughs him off, saying a weakling like him isn't even worth his time. Eustus hits the dirt hard, struggling to breathe as the taunts ring in his ears. For a second, he actually wonders if he's out of his depth. That is, until the spirit of Sword St. Julius rolls up with the entire squad of dead heroes, absolutely refusing to let him quit. She literally grabs him by the collar, demanding he remember his oath to protect the people until his dying breath. Then her expression softens, reminding him that he carries the collective will of the greatest fighters in history. Fueled by the ultimate pep talk, Eustus forces himself back to his feet, manifesting an insanely detailed, glowing holy sword. Overflowing with sheer holy energy, he levels the blade at the goblin, letting the monster know he's now fighting a living legend. With Julius's phantom standing right at his back, he prepares to show this boss exactly why you don't mess with the Sword Saint. This is the literal pinnacle of weapons, the legendary Holy Sword. We jump back into the memories of Julius, the Sword Saint, before she ever got her hands on it. Her parents try to step in, pushing her toward books and a safe life away from the battlefield, but she hits her dad with those sparkling puppy dog eyes, insisting she wants to be a proud knight. It's a critical hit to his heart, and he instantly caves, agreeing to train her. Fast forward to age 17, and she's already the kingdom's strongest knight. But that's not enough for her, so she casually tells her dad she's leaving to go wander the world. He completely loses his mind, demanding to know why their best fighter is just dipping. But she drops the bomb that she already got, the king's permission. He asks what could possibly make her go to such extremes, and she just says she wants to master the blade, which kind of makes her a terrible fit for standard military service. Realizing she went over his head, and knowing how stubborn she is, he finally accepts it. Her journey is basically one long string of dojo crashes and chaotic misunderstandings out in the wild. Like the time a heavily armored spearman attacks her in a pass. Assuming she's muscle for a local bandit crew, she tries to clear things up and just walk away. But when he charges again with zero mercy, she just casually one-shots him with the hilt of her sword. Standing over his unconscious body, she sighs about people never listening. And of course, the actual bandits pick that exact moment to try and mug her. Annoyed that anyone could mistake her for these scrubs, Julius absolutely yeets them across the rock face without breaking a sweat. grabbing one by the collar to officially introduce herself as the wandering swordswoman so they can spread the word. She even ends up bossing around local knights after a random dude literally falls from the sky in front of her. But the fun times don't last. Years later, a massive demon invasion completely wrecks the kingdom. Julius finds herself standing between the capital and a massive dragon, complaining about her terrible luck. She launches herself at its head, but the monster's scales are way too thick, and her regular blade completely shatters against its horn. She's left totally defenseless, knowing if she runs, millions of people die. Right as things look hopeless, a glowing greatsword randomly plummets from the sky and sticks into the rubble next to her. In that moment, everything clicks. Realizing the weapon chose her, she grabs the holy sword and charges back in to save the world. Back in the present, Eustus is channeling that exact same power. He carves right through the masked goblin leader's ultimate dark magic attack, making the boss completely lose his mind, screaming in disbelief that a mere human is overpowering him. Eustus just flatly reminds him that this blade was literally made to one-shot dragons. So a goblin never stood a chance, and the leader is completely obliterated, leaving only his wooden mask behind. Seeing their boss get deleted, the surviving goblin horde scrambles away in absolute terror. Eustus finally calls it, immediately collapsing and dropping straight into his own soul space. He ends up in that weird spiritual field, completely tapped out as Rowan walks up to him. Rowan notes that their minds are linked right now, which Eustus already figured out since he literally doesn't have the energy to stand. Rowan gives him the obligatory ominous warning that this goblin lord was just the tutorial boss. Eustus catches the hint about bigger bads. Learning the world is about to unravel way further than this one attack, but Rowan just smiles. Knowing Eustus chose this insane path himself, Eustus sits up, taking it all in stride, and they both agree they're on the exact same page. Looking up, Eustus thanks the hero spirits for the massive carry, before finally waking up to the sound of his name. He opens his eyes, finding his entire party hovering over him, crying their eyes out in relief. Realizing he completely passed out, he apologizes for giving them a heart attack, and hands out some well-deserved head pats to comfort them under the starry sky.